Hey everyone, I am here with Dr. Tamika Hall today on the Essential Creative Fireside Chat series. Hi, Dr. Hall, how are you?
Hey, how are you doing? I'm so hyped to be here. I'm like, Tamika, just reel it in and don't go too fast because I can go.
We'll give everyone a warning now. You may want to put this on 0.5 speed. We're both fast talkers. So I'm really glad to have you here today, too. I've been looking forward to this all week. Tell us a little bit about yourself so I don't fumble it up.
Okay, so I don't know. I should be really good at talking about myself. I'm just not good at talking about myself. I'm always, what's the term? An ambivert. I don't know what that, the person that's introverted, but I do very extroverted things. So I'm a digital media mogul. I'm learning to finally accept that that's what that is.
Yes.
But God has really used me in the digital space. And what he's allowed me to do is to minister literally all over the world in a digital space. So you will find me as the CEO of Tamika Inc., where we publish authors from all over the world. It's one of the coolest things I've ever been able to do. I'm also the CEO of She Wins by Faith. And what that is a global empowerment ministry for women. Through there, we are publishing anthologies, released a documentary last year, hosting retreats. It's just been really incredible with that as well. And those are just some of the things that I do and kind of how I ended up in your space. But that was probably really awkward. And that's bad because of the fact that I'm also, here we go, I'm also a radio host. I own a radio station. I worship 96. And so I'm really good at talking to other people, really great at interviewing others. But when people are like, Tamika, tell us about yourself, I'm like, I'm the awkward girl,
You know what I love about that is I'm similar. It's really hard. I have a lot of friends who think I'm a trust fund kid. They're just like the people I've met later in life are like, do you actually what do you do? Because I'm like everywhere. One of my clients and I write a devotion together. The other one, we're running a nonprofit. And then by day I work with submarines and defense. It's like, who knows? But no.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to clients though, I love let's talk about this. So speaking of which, so I met you because you didn't mention fashion designer in there and you have a whole line. So we have all these things coming out. And so for anyone who follows shelvera.com, you saw that this week I shared Purpose in My Pain. And that is how Dr. Hall and I kind of met. That's how the relationship started, but it really goes back a little further. And so I shared that with you very quickly. And so Dr. Hall, if you talk about this, I had shared with them that I saw this sassy commercial from you on Instagram. I think it came up as a promotion and It was you walking and it was just so edgy for a Christian thing. And I was like, oh, I love this. And I started following you. And the supplement was for pills that are like body deodorant and help people. And it was something that I was like, oh, she's talking about what people don't talk about. I love this. And so I started following you and then later saw the call for the anthology, which is how I met you. Talk to us about the supplements. So what do you do there? Is that still growing? How does that work in with everything you do?
Well, the commercial that you saw was me promoting smell pretty. If you smell stinky, we'll help you smell pretty. And what these are plant-based deodorant supplements, just like you said. 100% plant-based. I have deodorant capsules and we are going to be releasing deodorant gummies this year. And just kind of going through a rebranding and different things like that. But I will tell you, I was the stinky kid in the back of the room and which it actually was pretty painful because I couldn't understand why. I wasn't dirty. I was clean, but I was the stinky kid, you know what I mean? And stinky kids grow up to be stinky adults if you don't understand. And we as women, we're taught to be very flower-like. We're taught that you're supposed to smell really great, that you're supposed to be pretty. And then here I am, I'm in modeling, I'm in pageants, I'm traveling, I'm singing. I'm in all these places where I have to be around people and I have this odor problem. And really what I ended up understanding later on is that when I would sweat, that's when the odor problem would take place. So then what I ended up doing, I was about 35, 36. I then realized, okay, as long as I shower, as long as I get ahead of the sweat, then I'm good. So what that meant was I ended up showering 4 and 5 times a day because I'm one of those people, I sweat when I'm nervous. And here I am. I'm, like I said, I was a dance teacher. It's like, how do you not stink if sweat is an issue? I just hate to say that. And so and hopefully because your audience is mostly women, we can just be very candid here.
Absolutely.
And so I went through a period of almost 2 years. It was literally 18 months where I suffered from a bacterial infection, and we could not understand why. Like, we thought that my kidneys were shutting down and everything. And I finally one day said to my doctor, because I'm very dramatic if people haven't been able to tell yet. And I say to my doctor, I don't understand why this keeps happening. I was like, I shower 5 times a day. And I mean, she is not safe. So she was like, are you freaking kidding me? But she used the other word.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, this is the reason why you're dealing with this, is because you're washing away all of the healthy bacteria. And I'm like, that is the only way that I don't smell. She was like, well, baby, you got to figure out something else. And so at that point, I started researching. I'm like, what can I do? I knew, and it's okay, but I could not start a vegan lifestyle. I was just like, I really love meat too much, but that was the only solution that I found at first. So then I started looking at how do we utilize what God gave us and plants or what have you. And so then I started cold calling. It was like it was late 2018 into 2019. I started just cold calling manufacturers. And I was like, hey, listen, are you able to like produce this and like put it in a pill? And most of them were like, yeah, we can do that for you. It'll be $12,000. And I'm like, what? This one was like, it'll be $6,000. I'm like, yeah, I don't have that. So I was able to kind of negotiate with a small company in Florida, and they made like 12 bottles for me for like $60. And I'll tell you, Shell, it's amazing how when God gives you a dream to do something, everything around you can feel like it's falling apart. And my marriage of 12 and a half years ends, January of 2019. I'm transitioning. I'm living with my parents. I'm sleeping on the floor. I'm sleeping on a couch. But I finally get this product and it works. And I remember literally crying when I realized I went all day long. I did not have to change my clothing. I didn't have to run home or run somewhere and try to wash. Like, it was working for me. And but everything else felt like it was falling apart. So fast forward, here we are, 2022. God ended up having me release this in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. And we ended up shipping. We shipped to Malaysia and South Africa and Nigeria and Jamaica and all over the United States and the UK. And I was really nervous because I was like, God, I'm the pageant girl. Like, I'm the one that's won international titles. And I'm like, in order for this to sell, it has to be me. I have to talk about what other women don't talk about. Because I remember talking to my mom, and my mom was like, well, yeah, you'll kind of grow out of it. Like, it was kind of one of them things. And I'm like, but what do I do about this situation?
In the meantime,
And I just was like, oh, Lord, I'm gonna have to go around and tell people that I was the stinky kid. Like, I'm gonna have to admit that. And he was like, you're the one for the job. And so for me, when you saw that sassy video, that was, because women who are very sassy and they're beautiful and they want to own the room when they walk into it. You don't want to own the room and you smell when you leave. You know what I mean? So Smell Pretty. I mean, initially we were another name, but Smell Pretty came about. I used to talk to my little girls, my daughters, and I'd be like, come on, let's go take a bath so you can smell pretty. And I used to say that to them. So when I had a trademark situation, it had to change the name last year around this time. I was like, Smell Pretty is it, because that's exactly what it is. And it's been a blessing. Women and men have both been utilizing this product, and it's really just been changing their lives. It's been awesome.
It's funny because I want to order some. So the way I came across that, I know that it ended up in my Instagram feed because I was looking, I have a 14-year-old, and she, like, you talk about how, like right now my heart beats on my Fitbit says like, you're exercising, keep it up, because it's like, I sweat with that. Well, my little girl has inherited that. And so she would be playing Roblox in the middle of the pandemic, and she's getting excited and she's going, and I'm like noticing sweat circles. And I'm like, oh gosh, she's got the same thing where our body thinks we're exercising just because we're doing something we love. And she is vegan. So we started looking for like, what are some plant-based? Well, let me tell you, there are not many of those vegan deodorant creams and non-aluminum creams and things that work. So after spending like probably thousands of dollars trying different products from, like we went to the local co-ops and we were going to Sephora and like trying everything, looking at brands. And so I think, the algorithm always knows what we're doing. And all of a sudden it's like, smell pretty. And, and I think maybe it had the other name at the time. And I saw that and I just loved it, like the sass. And so it was one of those things where, when you first, and this is something for all of you who are watching, because I'm learning to get out of this. When you see things on Instagram, you're not always sure, right? You want to wait, you want to see if your friends buy them, and so here we were like, okay, we're going to settle with this one that we found and it works for now. But I started following you and looking. And so now I've got to know you and I see like, okay, it's legit. And I do need to finally order that. Hold me to that. But
no,
what,
I'm just send it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. What I ended up realizing through this process is there's so many companies, and I totally just took a side thing there, but I just want to make sure with people, there's so many companies we see that are great companies that have great products, but because they come up in our Instagram feed sponsored, or because we don't know somebody who bought from them, we wait and we might be missing out on that blessing. And so that was just a little free plug off topic. The other thing that you said that I love though, and when you were talking, my brain was like, ooh, you had a problem and God said, you're going to solve it. Yeah. What a testimony for how many times we're like, Lord, help me out. Lord, I want out of this situation. And he's like, but you have the resources. Go ahead. And we're like, no, I want you to send somebody to do it for me. So I love that you were like, I'm going to solve this, calling people. I love that you were calling local manufacturers. That's my world. For my day job is manufacturing. So it's great to see somebody like actually just cold calling them saying, can you help me? So nice plug for small businesses there too.
I mean, I would just say this, like, we oftentimes will have an idea for something and we think it's like way too big for us.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm in the field, I have a degree in theater, I have a degree in theater, but I have a background in grant management, who then got plucked out of, managing grants and writing grants and things, to teaching dance at a high school. You know what I mean? Like, it's like God literally will take your gifts and he'll make room for you, even when the world says that you don't qualify for it. Like, I've been a dance teacher or choreographer. I've worked professionally as a dancer, and I have like 1 month, literally 4 classes worth of dance training. Like, these things are just divine. I have a publishing company, and my design skills are divinely deposited. Like, I mean, I never took a class in how to design, and I've literally designed for some major celebrities that people even know. And so I would just say to people, like, if God puts if you find yourself not being able to sleep at night, you think about it all day long. And I kept thinking, I'm like, there's gotta be something that can help me. And you can't be scared. Like, as much as I'm out front and things like that, I don't like confrontation. And by confrontation, it's not always about having the homegirl neck roll. Confrontation is also confronting, picking up a phone, calling somebody that you don't know and say, hey, are you able to do this? And not being afraid that them saying, no, I can't do it, or yes, it's too much money, or yes, it's this amount. Not interpreting that as rejection. Because see, what happened is the enemy taught me rejection at a very young age. I was molested as a child. I was raped as a teenager. Rejection has been the vice that has followed me for most of my life. And so whatever your vice is, the enemy is going to play on that. Like, that's what the enemy's going to do. He's going to play on that. And your destiny, your assignment, the sound that you're going to release in the earth is going to be the thing that makes you the most uncomfortable. And so for me, calling up the manufacturer, it was uncomfortable. It was scary. I thought people were going to think I was stupid. And I was just like, you know what? At the risk of sounding stupid, at least you've done something. And like I said, when I realized the pill worked, I just was like, amazing. Oh my God. And because I stepped out and talked about it, my very first post ever was, I think it was actually February of 2019. And my first post was, I was like, I don't stink. Like, that's literally what the post was. I was like, I don't stink. And it's because of this, And a woman in Japan her friend sent it to her. She was my very first customer over in Japan.
Love that.
And she had been to doctors. They were telling her she needed to use beta blockers, and she went through painful procedures and nothing worked for her. But this pill worked for her.
That's
And,
awesome.
and she and I both cried over Instagram. Like it's been an amazing journey. So I would just say, look, if you have something on the inside of you, follow that, because God is going to put you in position to produce it.
Amen. Amen. And there's a few pointers in there is like, you had to get comfortable in a space that you'd known all your life. And I think sometimes like there's a spoken word poem I have where it's like, I'm not afraid of failure. That's like my best friend. I know failure well. It's success that scares the crap out of me. Like success is what's scary. And so sometimes like when it's that thing that you're most afraid of or that you know so well, the enemy will come in and, oh, are you sure you want to call them? What are they going to, say to you, et cetera? Where it's like, no, it's a business exchange. At the end of the day, when you're calling someone to ask them if their company can do something, it's a business exchange. Then, if you follow Christian principles, I know not everyone watching does, but then you have the divine on top of that it's like, this is the business exchange, similar to with reaching out with you about the anthology, where I was like, I'd seen it was a lot of African-American women. It was scary to reach out because it was like, well, will this be seen as racist if I ask you, will you accept a white woman? Like, that could be interpreted many ways. And some women would not respond well. It also was like, do I even have in today's environment the right to ask this? Like, is this me trying to insert my whiteness into something? These are all things that were going through my mind and could have kept me. But pushing past that, so just like you with the pills and calling the manufacturers, pushing past it, you were like, oh yeah, my ministry is multicultural. And it was like, but it took like a week of stressing and figuring out every possible thing. And that because you just, when you're so, like you said, you're so used to rejection, that's where the enemy will come. Like, oh, but this will be one more rejection. And oh, this time it's so big. This time, if you don't know anything about manufacturing, how are you going to call the president of that company to ask them if they can do that? And it's just like, how I'm going to do it? I'm going to pick up this phone and I'm going to call and he's going to talk to me, or she. There's a lot of women owners too. And we're going to have a conversation. They're either going to say, yes, I can, or no, I can't. It's that simple. And so anyone out there watching this, definitely go after those things. There's a lot of people within the creative community that you're so afraid of. What if this goes wrong? What if it goes right? I think it's Lewis Carroll that said that, right? There's that, like, what if I fall? Oh, baby, but what if you fly? And I forget who said that quote, but it's so beautiful. Maya Angelou, maybe?
Was that Dr. Seuss?
Was it Dr. Seuss? Funny. It might have been. I don't know. I'll make sure I put it in the notes for that goes along with this video, but it's so true. The other thing that I thought about while you were talking is today I was reading this book, or reading a review of a book by Daniel Pink, and the woman, Allison Giddens, she owns a manufacturing company down in Georgia, Wintech. And she shared that one of the biggest takeaways from the book was to write a failure resume. And the purpose of doing this was so that when you make a mistake, you could jot it down and you can look at it. So next time when you're about to do something that, I'm adding some stuff to it, but basically next time you're about to do something that scares you, look at this document. It's like, I failed this many times and I'm still here. Now I have to read the book. I'm really excited to read it. So I might have said that a little bit of way, but that's what I took away from the post. And when you were talking about that, I thought of it. Like, imagine, the other thing she mentioned is he said, what if you didn't do things like remove the things from your life that you were successful on, and what would happen if you hadn't done them? So if you hadn't come out with this pill, and that I'm looking forward to reading the book. I think it was called The Secret to Failure or something. I'll put the notes in the blog post that goes with this. But so on that note, kind of shifting is, you're a multi-passionatepreneur, right? Like you have that, so many things that you're good at. And I know that for my whole life, one of the things I struggle with, Dr. Hall, is people saying, but you've got to pick one thing. You've got all the books about do one thing well. Muhammad Ali, right? I'm not afraid of the man who can throw 55,000 punches. I'm afraid of the one who can throw one well. I'm the one who knows like 55,000 ways to do it. And so it was really growing up, and similar to you having all those different backgrounds, it was like, oh, I have to pick one thing, but then do I not write? do I not speak? Do I not lead youth? Do I not? Because if I can only do one thing, and you have shown me, and I love this, that you can be passionate in multiple things. So can you talk about that for a little bit? So, because you've got a fashion line, you've got the supplements, you've running the publishing company, you're a writer, you're an actor, you're producing books and movies. Like it's called The Bruises, No More Bruises.
Beyond the Bruises.
She went beyond the bruises. That was so powerful. The women in that, you had it open, I believe, for a free weekend, or it came. I remember when it came out, I got it that weekend because I'm a survivor of domestic violence. And that was so powerful. The stories, like those women went in sharing what they'd been through. So you've got all of these things going on where on one side you're like, hey, smell pretty, sassy, I don't sting. And then on the other side, very serious, like, let's talk with these women who have almost died at the hands of men. Let's talk about people who fell in love and something terrible happened and what it was like to get beyond that. How do you do that? Did you just know that, hey, this is me and how God created me, I'm going to do all these things? Or was there a moment in your life where you had to say, like, no, I'm good at all of them and I'm doing it? Like, how did that process come for you?
It was not an easy process for me because I've suffered a lot of ridicule behind it. And it didn't take, I didn't get comfortable with being who I am today until probably 2 or 3 years ago, where I could unapologetically show up as myself and say, I could care less what anybody else thinks about me. Up until that point, I was always concerned about what everybody else had to say. And it wasn't until, like, I put myself in therapy. Like, I went to therapy, did a lot of soul searching, had been divorced for the second time. And here I am facing this thing of like, okay, now you're a single mom with 2 children. And, growing up in the church, I was like, you're definitely tainted goods now. Like, nobody's going to want you, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's like when you hit rock bottom and you find yourself feeling like you are a failure, what do? Do you turn back to the things that used to be a distraction of your pain, or do you try to do something different? And it was at that moment where I had like $36. I tell this it's really my testimony, but $36, about to get evicted, not sure how I'm gonna, buy food for me and the kids for 2 weeks. And I'm faced with this dilemma. I'm like, do I call mom and dad? But I'm like, but Lord, I told you I was not gonna borrow any more money from my parents. Do I call these men that have been trying to date me for months? Because I know they would give me the money if I asked them for it. But if I take the money, I know they're gonna expect something else. And I had declared a man fast. So I was just like, so I was not dating. And I said, God, I'm gonna pursue you. And it was at that moment that God really began to strip away this mask that I'd always had. He began to strip away this facade. He took away the wigs and the lipstick and the lashes. And I just had to just totally be naked in the mirror for myself. Tamika, you are a people pleaser. You know what I mean? Like, Tamika, you do use your body for gain. Tamika, you do this, you do that, and the other. Once I began to work on those things on the inside, then I started being like, I'm going to start saying no. My confidence began when I started saying no to things that I did not want to do. I know that sounds crazy, but when I started saying, no, I don't want to do this. No, I'm worth more than this. No, you can't talk to me this way. I don't care if it's for a paycheck. I deserve better. I bring more to the table than this. Then all of a sudden, my confidence shot up. And then God really started showing me what he had given me. And it's like, God didn't create me to be one-dimensional. And it's like, and I said, okay, because see, I've always been the one, I can respect that somebody else may want to just do one thing for their whole life. I can respect that, but that's not who he created me to be. And so where I also began to really shift in my thinking is, if I can respect other people for who they are, if you cannot respect me and who God created me to be on this earth, then you're just not my people. And that's really okay. I gave myself permission to be okay with other people not being okay with me, right? Like I was really okay with that, So you might see me with one wig on today. Tomorrow I might have a wig that comes almost down to my ankles. Like if I want to, I'm going to wear heels every single day. I'm going to have my makeup on. And if I have an idea to start a business, I'm going to do that too. But the difference now, the difference with this now is, Lord, when do I do it?
Yes.
now it's not, before I used to do things all the time and I would feel like if I don't do it right now, somebody else is going to get the idea. No, what I learned is I stopped telling everybody my business. So what I also stopped doing is I stopped affirming my desires or my ideas by talking to other people. We hurt ourselves because we tell people too much of our business. And then people, they snatch your ideas, they shoot your ideas down, they're dream killers. And so when I got this relationship with God and he began to build my confidence, then that's when things began to fall into place. I started trusting myself again because I was like, okay, I'm trusting that I hear what you're saying, God. So when I started doing that, the business started making money. It started making money. And when God told me to shift, okay, Lord, this doesn't make any sense, but you've done it before and you're going to do it again. And so that's kind of the way that it's been. But it was not easy. It was not easy.
It doesn't sound like
easy. I'm like, give me your secret sauce, because it's not.
Right. What is that switch you have that I wasn't born with?
Right.
So you said about being okay being me. Oh, how important that is. You know, I think of our kids now, like we're raising the first generation. I know like you, like me, your daughters are a little older too, but like I have a 27-year-old and a 14-year-old. So 27, I do. And so there's a very big age gap. So my 27-year-old, you know, she was born when cell phones were, I think my first cell phone was like the year she was born, maybe the year after, like I forget, it was, you know, this silver little Nokia, which was like one of two choices, right? Like we all had it. Yeah.
Mine was blue.
Okay. Yeah. And it's like, you know, how did we ever walk around with those things? You had to 1, 2, 3 it to get to text somebody, you know. Nobody who texts today that has never had that kind of keyboard does not understand the pain it was to send long messages back then.
No. Because you had to click each button 3 times.
Yeah, it was like A, B, okay, B. And then, you know, like to say bye to somebody was like a 15-minute process. And God forbid you mess up in the middle of them by stopping, you know, pausing.
That's when calling was still really a thing. Because we were like, I'm not texting you.
When you didn't have to schedule calls, right? You know, like, oh, text me, we're calling. But I love, like, we're raising, so the people who are raising, like the 14-year-old, she's never not known technology. She's never not had a tablet or something available to her, even though we didn't have them in the phone. Like I was, you know, the mom that didn't give her a phone till she turned 14 last month. Same. Like that was not going to happen. I said 8th grade. 8th grade was the minimum. Well, she started 8th grade and I was like, I don't know, pandemic, Instagram, Snapchat. And so it was just like, you know, we're going to wait. But these guys today, they're constantly bombarded with images of perfection, images of what it looks like. Take the Christian kids who are really trying to figure out their faith, try at this time that you've got a million things and everything's acceptable and every faith is the same. All of a sudden they're like, well, then why do we go to church on Sunday? I don't need to do that if I can, because the messages that are constantly coming. So that being okay with being me, I love that message because it's not about everyone around.
I hate to cut in on you, but I will tell you what in my process of becoming okay with being me, God had to show me where I wasn't okay with being me. And he had to show me how that was causing an impact on my children. So I didn't realize that me walking around being like, oh my gosh, I got a role here. Oh, you know, like all these things. I started listening to the conversation of my daughters and they're walking around thinking that they're too fat. I'm like, sweet pea, if I had that body, like what you talking, you know? And so the Lord was like, he told me, you can't keep blaming social media for what's happening in your house. Yes. He said, you can't keep blaming it. So you know what I had to start doing? I had to start affirming myself. And I started doing it loudly. And I know I drive my kids crazy, but I'm like, y'all mama is a hot toddy, you know? And I started, and now here they are, they affirm themselves. Nice. And yes, they're still bombarded with these ideas of perfection, but there's nothing makes me feel better than when I have my daughter out of nowhere, because I'm their mom. They definitely have my traits. They'll randomly just be like, Mom, I really think I'm pretty now. And I'm like, good, because I've always thought you were beautiful, you know? And
that's amazing.
You know, how one would never wear her hair out. Her hair is longer than my wig naturally. Okay. but would never wear it out because she didn't feel comfortable. Now she rocks her really big hair and is okay to show up and be seen in a place. But I know it was because I had to show up first. Yes. I had to show them, y'all's mama is a hottie. Like, and I'm like, how do y'all live with your mama like this? Like, you know what I mean?
Do y'all feel that heat over there?
Yeah, like what, you know, and so then all of a sudden then they started doing it. And I would be like, oh my God. And they're like, well, mom, you do it. I'm like, yeah, I guess you can do it too, you know. But the more what you say to yourself matters. And if you are constantly saying to yourself, you are smart, honey, you are a boss, babe, you are a mogul, you will be successful, baby, you are a dime piece. Like you then, it really becomes a thought. And literally, and Shell, now, you know, I love connecting how our body actually works and how our brain actually works.
Yes.
And literally when you affirm yourself, I'm not talking about manifestations, friends. I'm talking about affirmations. When you're affirming yourself, you actually create new neural pathways in your brain. So your brain begins to think differently. You can literally reprogram your brain. Yes. And once I understood that, I was like, that is powerful. So I started reprogramming myself with the word and what God had to say about me. And I push my children to do the same thing. And so, yeah, like when you said that, I'm like, I got to pause because even with everything our kids are going through, my God, I'm so glad I'm not growing up right now. But even with everything that they see, we really still are the biggest influence.
We are. And I thank you for pausing to say that, because it is true. As much as all this stuff is, and they are still, you know, the first generation having all of that, what we do at home matters more. Mm-hmm. I really do feel that way. You know, there'll be days that my daughter comes home and she'll say something like, well, like there's this new thing. We just took masks out of school here. Like it just happened the 28th. And she was saying that some of the kids still want to wear them because they're prettier here. And I was like, you know, we used to call them Monets growing up, right? It was like the Mona Lisa, and it was the person who looked really nice or far away, but up close didn't. And they have this term now for people that look better here. You know, oh, she's so beautiful. Oh, what happened? And it's like, oh my gosh, like here we're all fighting over political stuff, and that's what they take from it.
Well, my youngest daughter, like, Mom, everybody's talking about now we're going to really get to see what people really look like under their mask. And I'm like, oh my God, can y'all please just go to school? Like,
Yeah. And it's crazy because it was 2 years. I know it was like going into 3, like long years, but it was like, you would swear you're 14. You had 12 years where you guys looked at each other in the face.
Saw each other's face before
but yeah. So now one thing I love with my daughter, she's on the spectrum. And so she's really high functioning. You have to have like a really deep conversation with her till suddenly you'll realize like you hit a wall where her abstract thought can't be there anymore. Gotcha. And it took a lot of training, a lot of neurofeedback, a lot of work with her. And she's just this amazing kid right now. And she has this thing. So I'm not the one to be like, oh, I look hot today. Like if I say that, you know, like grab a photographer, we're going to do a photo shoot because I feel it today. And this is the one time in like a year. Like I'm still working on self-esteem. Allie, though,
honey, I'm gonna put you in front of the camera. Don't play with your pretty stuff. Stop it.
And Allie will like be getting ready in the morning and she's like, I look amazing. And I'm just like, she has it. And I love that. I'm like, yes, girl, like you do, you know, and she still has moments, I think like every teenager, but I love that she's in that world. Now, skipping back just real quick, guys, you know, I love my books, and Dr. Hall was just talking about neuroplasticity and the change. Dr. Karen Lynn Leaf does some amazing work there with sharing scriptures and how to retrain your brain, how it's 93 days. You know, we've always been told, 30 days to make a habit, break a habit. No, it's 93. In 30, you start to make progress, but the brain cells are renewing something like 93 days or something like that. So Dr. Karen Lynn Leaf, Switch On Your Brain and Clean Up Your Mental Mess are 2 really good books. I think I said them right. And then there's also, for those of you who are into essential oils, Truth Drops. That is a book that actually, what you were talking about, Dr. Hall, where she goes into dealing with trauma through essential oils, affirmations of scripture. And it's all about retraining your brain through the use of smells. How, you know, when you've been raped, when you've been molested, when you've been in traumatic situations, to this day, Drakkar perfume, cologne for men, if I smell it, I go right back to when I was 14 and something really bad happened. Like I'm right back in that moment. And that's after years and years of therapy. And so what she does is use essential oils to, as you affirm these things about yourself, you're smelling them. And now it's bringing every time you smell cedar wood, if that's the oil you choose, now like you smell cedar wood and you think, I am a child of the Most High God. And
Oh,
it's really
gosh, that's
powerful.
amazing.
I'm only in like week 4 of the 10-week class or 12-week class, but it's really great. So those are some books for you guys, because I know we have a lot of reading fans on here. So Dr. Hall, it is 1:48 just for a time check, but my daughter is taking the bus, so we're good. If you're good, so we'll talk for a little bit longer if you're good for that. Perfect. And you guys hang in, because we haven't even touched the surface yet. So Dr. Hall, let's talk about books. So on that little segue there. So you have The Purpose and the Pain anthology, which is where I met you, where we talked about tragedy, trauma, situations in life. And you challenged every woman on there, like, dig deep. Don't just tell me the ones that you know, but tell me the ones that God's telling you to share in here. So can you talk a little bit about that project, and then share with us some of the other ongoing ones you have? And I believe I heard a rumor that you have a book coming out as well. So please.
I do. So The Purpose in My Pain, it really came out because I was trying to find a solution for my own pain, believe it or not. A lot of what I've done is because I've been seeking God for something, and then I go after it, and it's been a beautiful ride that there's just been this beautiful sisterhood literally all over the world that has formed from it. But Purpose in My Pain is a devotional anthology. It's not something that I've ever really seen in it, that people are doing, because I am a publisher, so I'm behind the scenes on a lot of books that people may not even know. But I had not seen a devotional anthology, and I love devotions because I think it's important for us to connect with God very quickly. And I like bite-sized chunks, because for me, if you give me too much at one time, my brain's like, deuces, like I have something else to think about. And so we ended up, when it was all said and done, there are 28 of us all together, women who came, and we met over a period of about 3 or 4 months, and we connected, and we had to explore what our pain was. What was it? And how did we discover what the purpose was? Because I think that all of us, it's life, and what pains you today is not going to pain you in 5 years. It actually might be something else, unfortunately. I mean, I hate to say that, but there have been things that God has brought us through, and you come through on the other side, and you're like, oh, that's why I went through that. If I wouldn't have gone through this, I wouldn't be able to talk about that, right? I think about all of the hurt that I have gone through. I kind of mentioned it, being molested, in a group of teens. I was about 5 years old when that first happened, and then being raped and losing my virginity, when I was 14, and then jumping from one abusive relationship to another abusive relationship to another one. Even though I experienced those things, and nobody would just want to experience that, through that, I have, where I used to be afraid to be friends with women, that's the ministry that God's called me to. God has called me to hurt, broken women. And God's called me to them to show, you might feel shattered today, and it doesn't matter how small you are shattered, how small those pieces are. God literally can put you back together, and he can do it over and over and over and over again. And so that's what this anthology, this devotion is really about. And so the stories we have women that have dealt with mother issues, like feeling abandoned by their mother, other women that have dealt with domestic violence and molestation and wanting to be perfect. And just beautiful chapters of losing a love only to understand, okay, well, you just weren't for me. You really were for somebody else, but I learned something from this situation. And what I love is that even though God chose me to spearhead this, God utilized, God utilized you in the midnight hour. We were on the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, one morning, and God used you to help me admit that I was in pain about something. Like, I was really in pain, and it was causing a lot of anxiety, but I really could not put words to what I was feeling. And you were a midwife for me in the middle of my pain. And so I look at this book as being a literary midwife of sorts to people who we may not be able to connect with you, but God can touch you where we can't. And our prayers and what he gives to us can go where we can't travel. And so that is what this book is about. And it's literally been on like 4 different continents already. And it's just been an incredible ride. It's been really incredible.
Absolutely. Just before you talk about some other projects, the one thing I want to say, what I loved about this book, so being a former ghostwriter and having been in the industry, I've witnessed a lot. And so I just, I've said this to you privately, but I want to say it publicly. What you did with this book, I've been on the editing and publishing side, like behind the scenes for a lot of anthologies. None of them were done the way this was, where from day one, it was, here's the process. This is the map we're going to follow. If you have questions, let us know, but we're not deviating from this. And then you had like, in that first meeting, it was like, I'm going to set you up with this. And here's what you're going to do when it's done. And here's the high level. So you know the big picture, but now chunks from here. And then second of all, the way that you really honored each of the women, allowing them to be part of the project and benefit from it. That's not something a lot of anthologies do. And then the third part is how you truly, I remember that first call and you were like, ladies, pray, here's the guidelines for it. But if God takes you another way, go for it. And I was like, oh my God, like the control freak in me was like, oh, what if somebody has 35 pages? Like, it was so funny how like I saw from day one, your faith in God that like, this is your project. I'm just the facilitator. And then how it all came together. You said it, I got excited about it. And then, the publisher, like the thought process, like the writer, book coach, whatever you want to call me, that person was like, wow, this is going to be interesting. I wonder like how the stories will come, like I was picturing this devotional where it was like almost like read, stop versus like a flow, right? Because how do you bring 28 women together and not have it where it feels like you're reading something new every day? And yet the way you brought it together, the way obviously God brought the stories, but you as a publisher, you as the one taking those pieces, you read this and there is something for everyone. Whether you are that, like I have a friend who's like, do I have to go sin just for God to love me? Because she grew up always listening to like the stories of people who were broken and drug addicts. And she didn't have that story. She came from a good home. Her parents loved her. She'd never done drugs, didn't have sex till she was like they thought we have to go do something wrong because if not, we don't have a testimony. And it's like, no, your testimony is in being kept and not being the one to do those things. And there's all of those in this one 28-day devotional. You have literally a story for like every woman. I even think some of you men, I know I have a couple male watchers, you guys can find stuff too for the ladies in your life and for yourself. Sometimes I'll grab a male devotional because they don't tend to have as much of the like gushy emotion. Like, oh my God, yeah, like that kind where you're just like laughing, crying, doing everything. They're more straightforward, like Tony Evans, and there's another Tony who was a football coach at one point. He writes some really good stuff too. I can't think of his name, but I'll grab those only because it shows me the male perspective. And one day, if I'm going to be married, I need to understand your perspective. I failed the first time. I don't want to fail again, on that part of my life. And so I love that in this devotion, it reads as 28 separate chapters, and yet it's one story of how God can use you wherever you are. He will take that, you see Romans 8:28 lived out of how everything will turn for the good. And it doesn't, when you're going through something bad, you don't want like, oh, you were just raped. Well, God's going to use that for his glory later. No, we're not going to say that to women. But when you are here, it's how you can look at Dr. Hall, just say like, this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me, without the mascara running everywhere, without the and it's not that you run away from the emotion. It's that God's given you a joy to understand. If it had happened to someone else, maybe they would have like shattered in a way that couldn't be put back together. Yes. And because it happened to you, you could stand strong. And he knew that. And it's hard. So if you're one of those, I guess there's two things coming to my mind as I say that. And that is, if you're watching this and you're one of those women who is broken and who's just feeling like, man, everything keeps happening, know that God is with you. And I know that sometimes that doesn't hold its weight for water when you're in that mess. But I promise you, because these two women right here, both of us on the screen, have testimonies where it's like, how are you even still breathing? Yeah. But we are. And with joy, we're ministering to other women because of that. You too can be in there. And one day you'll be talking to somebody and you'll be standing strong in a place where you're their feet for them. The second thing that came to mind when you were saying that is how important it is to share our stories and to have people championing that. So whether it's that you're a publisher out there or whether you're just a friend, remember to give the people around you a chance to share how they've got to be who they are today. Even just random dinner conversations. We're so afraid to have those too deep conversations, but we need to, because I imagine the woman I would be missing out on if you and I didn't connect at a deeper level. Like, I wouldn't have known. It would have just been, okay, that was Dr. Hall. She published it. She makes a supplement. She has a fashion line. Nice. But instead there was this moment that brought us together, and we connected on a deeper level through prayer. It wasn't even like we had this girlfriend conversation. It was God saying, I need you. You're going to talk to her, and just going that. And I love that. I love how he will put people in your life to be there. And so I'm really excited about that. Now, you also have other projects that you're working on. So let's talk about those for a moment.
So, I'm getting ready to start a brand new project called I Am Stronger Than the Storm. So it is another devotional anthology, devotional, whichever way. And like, for whatever reason, like, it's scrambled in my mind how I want to say it, but we'll be meeting for the first time very, very soon. And so I'm really excited about that. That's going to be coming out in May. And so that's going to be another very powerful anthology that's going to be released all over the earth. April 2nd. I'm really excited. And I actually have, you know what's so funny? Everybody from the project ordered Purpose in My Pain. And I'm sitting over here, I fulfilled like literally like 20 some different orders and forgot to order myself a copy of the book. And I'm sitting here like looking, I'm like contacting the printer. I'm like, where are my books? And I'm like, oh, you never ordered any. So I don't even have a copy of it yet. It's supposed to be here tomorrow. Thank God. Like,
good.
I want to hold it in my own hands. But The Bodyguard of My Heart is a poetic conversation that happened between me and God. And so it was amazing when you were talking about, you know, being broken and feeling like, you know, being broken over and over again and feeling like you just don't know if anything's ever going to be better for you. And I'd had a moment where I'd felt very shattered again. Matters of the heart have always been my issue. And, and I felt very shattered. And I'm one of those people, I don't know if it's a good trait or not, I don't know, but it's like, I'll just take off. And this one particular day, I was just like so hurt that this was just like a couple months ago, I just jumped in my car, booked a room overlooking the ocean. And in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I guess is the time, it's between midnight and morning. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm curled up on the bed. I am sobbing because my heart feels like it is completely breaking again. I don't know if anybody's ever been that heartbroken that your chest hurts. And that's how I was. And I was crying into my pillow. And I just started having a conversation with Papa. That's what I call God. And he started talking back to me. And he told me that he was the bodyguard of my heart. And he really began to pour into me. And he told me to take out my phone. And so I started writing this conversation that God and I are having. Like, y'all, God is the beauty of God astounds me that I had a poetic conversation with Papa. Like, I'm conversing with him and he's conversing right back to me in rhyme. Like, it was incredible. And I wrote most of it. And then I just kind of hit a block and then finished it up in January. Like, I would kind of come back to it, but it was like such a deep place of hurt where God said, basically in a nutshell, God said, I'm going into the closet of your heart. And all of the bags that you've stuffed your hurt in, your shame, your pain, all of these things that you've stuffed all of this into, all these bags, I'm helping you clear this away. And he even, the one thing that hurt, like, it doesn't hurt, but it's the one thing that made me sob, is when he said, you've been upset for the times that I said no. He said, but my daughter, you were just aiming too low. And that right there is when I broke and just like, I let out a wail. And what I really learned is that sometimes rejection really is God's protection, because we think we want something and God's like, baby, I see who you are, not just who you are today, curled up crying, but I see who you are in 5 years. And the man that needs to be with you in 5 years, in 6 months, 8 months, a year, it's not who you thought, because that one can't handle the anointing that I have on your life and the assignment that I have on your life. And I remember emerging from this, and especially when I finished it toward the end of January, finished writing it, and literally sat down over a course of 2 days, probably a total of 12 hours, designed it out, edited, re-edited, all that stuff, submitted it to the printer, ordered it, and got it here. And so, yeah, this comes out on April 2nd. I'm really proud of it. I've never done anything like this before, but it's definitely like that. You know, if you got for yourself, or if you got a homegirl that's going through something, you gift this to her. And so, yeah, I'm excited about that.
I love can you hold that up one more time so people can see?
Yes.
Ladies, I love it. And I love what you said about gifting it. That is so beautiful.
Thank you.
You know, there's
when
so
I put
much
it together, like, you know, you're a designer, so it's like multiple pictures together, but, you know, it's what it is. Like, God really guards our heart. And it's like, when your heart is broken, you feel like you're standing on the outside of yourself looking in, and you never feel like there's a light at the other end of the tunnel. And God's like, yeah, baby, you can get through it. Like, there really is light at the end of the tunnel, and I got you. You know, he's like, and the way he described himself to me, you know, it's like I said, it's a poetic conversation, but there's at one point where I'm saying, why are you here? And he said, I answered your help wanted ad. And I'm like, what do you mean? You know, he said, I'm the bodyguard of your heart. Don't you see that? Like, don't you see that I protect you, your front, your side, the back? He's like, I go to a location and I survey that before you get there. I survey a person before you get there. Like, that's how much God really loves us, that we feel like we're being rejected at our jobs or at church, or you know, but I'm gonna tell you, there are things. I would have never formed my own production company back in, when did I form it? I think like 2015. 2013. I would have never formed my own production company if I hadn't been rejected at my church, the church I was going to at the time. Because, you know, I have a degree in theater, been acting forever. And there was a person there that was like stopping me, would not allow me to put on my shows there. And I was required to go through them. Like, that was the proper order. And the person that was in charge of that would not allow me to do it. I mean, and later on, you know, we reconciled, and there was an apology, and it was a thing of like, I'm sorry, I was jealous. But had that never happened, I would have been content with just, I'm not saying this in a demeaning way, but I would have been content with just producing my productions right within those four walls. And here's the thing. Some people are called to the four walls. That's okay. But that's not who God called me to be. And if he would have allowed me to get comfortable there, he knew I would have never sought, I wouldn't be who I am today. People wouldn't know who I am in Malaysia or Australia or the UK, because I would have been okay with just a few people knowing who God is through my life in one space. But God really will put a mandate on our lives, and he assigns us to different regions, to different people, and wherever he assigns you, it is important. I don't care if you're the person that's cleaning the toilets at church. I don't care if you're the greeter at church. You're the first person that people see, and your smile means a lot. Like, when people work for me in my company, the one thing I tell them is, you have to lead with love. That is important to me, because you have to love people. We really love people back to life. And so wherever you fit in, it's important. And so sometimes God will close a door. He'll allow a door to even slam in your face, because he knows with me, I'm going to keep going back. I'm the one that I'm so hard-headed. And God knows he's got to slam the door where it's obvious that I need to not try to go through it again. Like, I got to break my nose on this invisible door before I'm like, oh, okay, I got you. I'm not doing it anymore. Yeah, I'm not doing it anymore. So, you know, God knows. And that's the beautiful thing about a bodyguard. You know, if somebody in real life, if somebody tried to shoot you, they're going to jump in front of the bullet. And it doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt in the process, but they're saving your life, you know, and it changes the trajectory of your life. So
it really does. And sharing that story, Dr. Hall, I commend you for sharing it. You know, there's so often we don't want to talk about being rejected when it comes to love, right? We're fine talking about it in the job sense. We're fine talking about it in the friend sense. But when it comes to love, it's a really hard story. And it wasn't a conversation with God, but I had when I stopped remembering tomorrow, this was a poetry book I'd been compiling for 22 years. And I'd always just been stuck on the introduction of the book. And then a couple years ago, when my uncle passed away, I'd been praying and I was like, oh, it must be weird to not remember tomorrow. And it was clearly just like a catch of the tongue. But I knew in a minute I got my book title. That is it. And then the intro just flowed, and it ended up being this story of how I fell in love with a guy who didn't love me. And there's a lot more to the story than what I share in the book. But I was like, this is poetry from my whole life. He was 5 years of it. How does that, but God was like, that's the story. And the way that that story has connected me with some other women who are like, nobody's ever talked about it, and I joke, like in the trailer for the book, when a girlfriend had me record it, I was like, we've all fallen in love with somebody. It's just you were 5, I happen to be 38, But so I commend you for doing this and doing it in a way that is true to who you are, and having it be in this poetic conversation. And just that cover is so captivating. So there's 2 things I want to say to those of you watching, and that is, buy the book. Even if you don't think it's for you, I really feel there's going to be a message there. And I don't say that lightly. Y'all know I'm pretty transparent about how I feel about a lot of things. So just go get that, because I think there's going to be something for everyone. And the second thing is, rewind this, because she just said so much in those last like 10 minutes about God and the bodyguard and the rejection. And some of you guys need to hear that again. Like, listen to it, put it on like 0.5, and let it really minister to your heart. So when I look down, just so everyone knows, I'm writing notes to myself, me and my stickies. And so there were 2 things that came in this shattered versus broken concept. We always talk about being broken. And there was a time in my life when I was moving back from Florida, and God showed me he needed to shatter me, because sometimes when we're broken, we just go to Band-Aids. When something breaks, you duct tape it. When something breaks, you grab out the Gorilla Glue, right? We've developed new models of glue that will literally hold anything together. We find fixes, but when something's shattered,
you have to create something totally new from
You're
it.
done. And that applies to like anything. You get a crack in your windshield, it's broken, you can still drive, right? You look around, you lean to the other way. When it's shattered, you're calling the people, a Safelite or whoever, to do your glass. And so I just really wanted to mention that, there is that place. And when you feel broken, ask God, is it really just a breaking, or are you at the point of shattered, that rock bottom, build up again? Going back toward like the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned like you'd hit rock bottom and you were like, I can either go back to what I know, or I can pivot and start doing something new. And I know pivot is such I think it was like one of the top 15 words not to use this year because of the pandemic, but that word means something. And it was long before the pandemic that people were doing that in their lives. The second thing I wanted to share, she's come up a couple times in my head as you've been talking, and you mentioned about going away to the beach and not knowing is a good trade or not, that you just couldn't take off. You talked about having to close the door. You talked about at the beginning of our conversation, not giving everybody access to your information and how you just need to do it. Sometimes the very people you're speaking to are the ones shutting you down, and you could have a great idea, but you're not surrounded by the right people who can accept it. And back then the thought came, but my ADHD went away on the train and went down, and she just came back, and that is the woman with the oil. And I always come back, she is one of my favorite Bible characters, right? Because she goes to the prophet, she lets them know that like they're about to take her kids. And the prophet is like, she has just a little bit of oil in her house. And he's like, I want you to go ask all your neighbors for jars that you're going to pour this oil into. And when you study it biblically, right, they're not like little jars, guys. We're not talking like little cutesies, right? We're talking vats of oil. And he's like, yeah, just grab that and start pouring. Can you imagine when you're that broken? Like, I've got this much oil. It doesn't take a genius to know how far I'm going to get. Why don't I just go ask for one? And what I love is her sons were the ones in the story that it says went out to the neighbors and started bringing the jars in, right? And they brought him in. And then she shut the door. Now, we don't know, right? We weren't there, but we don't read about her stopping along the way to tell other people, but did you hear what the prophet told me? Do you think that's a good idea? She went back to her house, her sons got the jars, and then they closed the door, and only the 3 of them were privy to what happened. And so if you read the story, you know that oil did not stop till her last vat was filled. What a powerful. And so when you talked and you were talking about closing the doors, sometimes you need to close the door because God has something that's this much right now and what he wants to do with you. Like for you, it was that the story of as you say, and it's so fun, like, because we don't talk about that. Like you said, being the stinky kid. Who would think that years later you would be setting women free from, we never talk, even like I can remember times being even scared to talk with my doctor about stuff. And it's like, you went to school for this. You chose to do this all day. And yet we're afraid to talk to each other about it. And here, not only did you talk about it, but you found a solution and now it's helping women and men. And in a pill, guys, like, I don't know about you, but between the sprays that make me cough and the, roll-ons that like, then it's like, oh, did I get white on my shirt? Like, it's a pill. Like, oh my gosh, try it. And so sometimes it's that shutting of the door. It's that confiding in only one or two people. It was her and her two sons. That is it. We have no evidence that she ever, I guess we don't have evidence that she didn't talk to anyone either, but we have no evidence that she talked with anyone along the way. And yet she ended up, the story says that all of her debts were paid and I believe it said like her grandchildren were set. Like that was it. Yeah. So generation.
If she would have said something to people along the way, we see this snapshot of this woman, but let's be honest, her neighbors probably knew that they were close to dying. Like, because for her, she knew, hey, I'm just going to make this bread for me and my kid, and this is just going to be it. We're, and so, well, wait a minute, I'm mixing up two different stories. But,
I do that sometimes too, but it's same thing.
Regardless,
a little bit of oil.
People knew that she was not well off, know. And so sometimes you can literally be sitting in the middle of a room and you are completely broken or you're shattered. You're completely depleted and people can see you and they walk around you because they are focused on their own stuff. Some people know that you are at rock bottom and they are just like, I'm too consumed with what I have. So imagine if she would have said, hey, I need to borrow this jar because this prophet dude just told me to pour in it. They would have called her crazy. And so that's the reason why sometimes you got to keep some stuff to yourself and let God do the work and let God perform the miracle behind closed doors, because he ultimately is the one that gets the glory. And in the middle of him getting the glory, guess what? You get to shine too. For the person that's like, well, I want people to know my name. Your name's going to shine also. Like God says he'll do it in due time, in your due season. He will make you shine. He will do that.
Amen.
That's powerful. I never looked at it.
Oh, I love, she's one of my favorite. When your nothing is not enough, I think I called it, a blog post I've come back to. She's so much. Or when your nothing is enough, that's what it's called. Cause she says, I have nothing, right? He has her do this inventory of what do you have? And she's like, I have nothing, like just some oil, and our just could be that very thing. I have nothing. I'm shattered right now. You mentioned like moving back home with your parents, like going through divorce. I have nothing. What do you want from me right now, God? And yet he was like, oh, you remember what happened as you were growing up? Remember that pain? I got a solution for it. Here's how you're going to find it. Like all of that stuff. I love when I have friends who are like, well, it's not all God. You're right. Some of it's not. It's a headache. It's because I listen to loud music, whatever. But sometimes it's God saying, I need you to pause. I need you to sit back for a moment. I need you to come in with me. Because what do we do when we have a headache, right? We sit back. We drown out things. God in everything. Everything. Yeah.
If we look for God in the little things, we see him in everything.
Yes.
And people think that we're, because now people call me a Jesus freak and all that. I don't care. I wear that badge. I wear that sash with honor. Get me the crown. I'm like totally okay with it. But what if the headache, because you had the headache, you chose to go home instead of going a different direction, and now you've missed a whole car crash that would have taken your life. Like I just believe that God doesn't allow things to happen to us for no reason. Sometimes you get a headache because the Lord, like for me, I was having these major headaches. I was 32 at the time, and I was having these headaches. And because I had the headache, I remember saying to one of the teachers, because I was teaching at the time, I said, oh my God, my head just hurts. I said, it's been hurting for days. I can't even, like, I just go home and I'm in the dark. She was like, that sounds like your blood pressure. It had never occurred to me. I was 32. I had been a dance teacher. Like, I'm really at the time was in probably the best shape of my life because I'd been competing in pageants and stuff. And so it was like, And when I went in, I mean, and then when I'm checking my blood pressure, I mean, it's like 200 over like 180. Like I was near stroke zone, you know? But if it wouldn't have been for the headache, I wouldn't have checked my blood pressure. And I wouldn't have gone to get that regulated, you know? And now, of course, I'm on medication right now because it's inherited, you know, it's something that rolls in the family, but I look for God in everything.
Yeah. I'm one of them that like every now and then even Allie will be like, Ma, not everything is because of God or the enemy. And I'm like, I get it. You know, like one of the things even with when I talk about essential oils, I tell people like there's a moment that it's essential oils and prayer, but there's other things that you're using essential oils and prayer for that you need to be going to the doctor to get checked, you know, and it's always that discernment. It's that discernment. I can pray away a demon if it's a demonic attack, but sometimes it's truly a physical attack. Lisa Turkhurst in the beginning of It's Not Supposed to Be Like This, I think was the book. She talked about how there was an emergency that brought her in where she went to the doctors. Had that not happened, she never would have found out she had cancer. And wow. I think that's the way the story goes. Sorry, Lisa, if I'm putting that the wrong way. But it was this series of events that had to happen for her to learn about this. And sometimes it takes the drastic. And when I love what you said, because when we look for him in the little moments, the conversations, the this disaster had to happen for me to get to this place to meet this person who later would be over here and we're working together. You know, there's all these little things that we just don't know. And I call them God kisses. Like when you have those moments like where like, you know, the headache ends up taking you home early and then you read about the accident and you're like, I would have been there, you know, like that's his moment where he's just like holding me and kissing me. And I love like that thought of it because it's just one of those. And especially for me, you know, my father is everything. He's provides so much, but I only know him as a provider, not an affectionate man. Like our families, I could probably count on one hand how many times we've hugged. And so to think of God like that, of like just wrapping me in his arms and embracing me, it's like, that's that moment because you have to purposely be in that moment for it to happen. So even if it's a headache or if it's a, you know, gosh, for some of us who are ADHD, sometimes it's like, oh, I saw that restaurant, I'm getting off this exit, you know, and it's like, you think it's something silly, but all along that was God leading your steps. So I know we've been on here for a little while. And so one of the things I want to share or that I'd like you to share is how do people get the and say the title for me again, because I watched it, you released it last year, the documentary about no more bruises or she.
Mm-hmm. You just go to shewinsfilm.com. If you go to shewinsfilm.com, you'll be able to either rent it or you can purchase it and own it. And yeah, that's my baby right there. I mean, that right there, I was producing that when I had absolutely no money. I took the last $500 that I had in my bank account for the first shooting of it, and the footage was garbage. And I remember being like, I just want to walk away from this thing. And luckily my best friend, who is a filmmaker, was like, Tamika, you got to get back on here. I mean, because I felt shattered then. I'm like, I took the last bit of money in my bank account. And then we had to reshoot everything again. And we did that a couple of months later. And it was with a little bit less than that. And then when we were supposed to release, then the world shut down for the pandemic in 2020. But there was a God kiss right there, because literally 8 days before we were supposed to premiere, the world shut down and the theater shut down. But what a difference a day makes. A year later, I was able to hire another editor who elevated my film, like took it to cinematic status, you know, where I could be very proud of it. And it's just one of the things, like if it would have opened when it was supposed to, I wasn't proud of it. I really wasn't proud. I just was releasing it because I was like, okay, let's let it just be done. And God was like, no, I'm gonna let you put your best foot forward, you know? And in doing that and waiting that extra time, I was the first African-American woman to ever release a film in that particular theater in their 100-year history. You know what I mean? So that's a definite God kiss right there, you know? So yeah, if people are interested, go to shewinsfilm.com. But I'll tell you, Shell, anybody that's interested in anything that I talked about, if you go to tamikahall.com, that's the hub of everything. Yeah, that's the hub of everything. Yeah.
Yes. And through tamikahall.com, you guys can see some of the lives, links right to the lives that you did with some of the authors from the anthology. You can see everything that Dr. Hall's working on. one thing I want to say is, even if you're not interested in the film, as a domestic violence awareness advocate, I implore you, watch it. It was not expensive, because I remember at the time that you released it, I was not in the best of financial state, and I still was like, I'm getting this. I forget if there was like a free release and then I ended up, but I have that.
For rent, yeah.
What was it?
$9.99.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and because I remember it was just something where it was like, okay, give up Burger King. Like, don't eat fast food tomorrow. You'll be healthier. Like, your heart will help you. But here's the thing. A lot of folks are scared to listen to the stories, and the stories in that film, I've gone through it. I lived through it. I had to do neurofeedback for years to get over the PTSD from living through it and just from all of the abuse in my life. And yet I still learned things. And it was one of those that if you've lived a perfect life and it scares you to hear from victims and survivors of domestic violence, let that fear, as we've been talking throughout this whole thing, that's kind of been the theme, like, put that fear, because you may be an advocate. And knowing right in the beginning of the pandemic, I lost a friend to domestic violence because I had been so far removed. You know, we're going on 14 years removed from it. I didn't see the signs. And her husband ended up murdering her, right? And it was like 2 months into the pandemic. And we are still, even though the world's starting to feel normal again, guys, if we learned anything from the shutdown, it's that not everyone's okay. And sometimes you're their key to becoming okay. And it's not always clean. Working with domestic violence, oh man, you are there's a certain type of person who can do the work of helping someone get out of that situation, because there's a lot of I would still be married now if he didn't left. I've never said anything otherwise. If he hadn't chose to leave, I would still be married, because I was in it for life, and that was my mindset. But what you can do, even if you're not that person, is be aware. Had I been a little more aware of the different ways it could happen, I might have heard some of Angelina's cries for help. I might have heard some of the ways she was talking about how amazing the marriage was. I might have heard beyond the words, which is such a gift of mine in every other situation. And yet now I've lost a friend because I didn't. So I implore you, just go visit it, rent it, purchase it, watch it, and just take away from it whatever there is for you to take away from. And that's Christian, non-Christian, like everybody. I just feel that we should all be aware of it in these times. And it will help you with the children too, because the children that are in these, teenagers and little kids living in homes like this, you'll hear things from listening to the women. And there was a man. Was there a man in your story too? Or reference to one? It was all women. Okay, there was reference, I think, to a male, or to the fact that men are abused too.
Yeah, we definitely did reference that. Yeah, because that's important for people to know that it's not just about women. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's a smaller percentage that come forth, right? We don't know the real stats because they don't come forth. But so definitely watch that. Dr. Hall, we have April 2nd. Your book is coming out. They can go find that on Amazon, or do you sell that through your website as well?
You can find it anywhere, but by then it will be on Amazon. I mean, it'll be on my website. But yeah, it'll be on TamikaHall.com. I'm glad you said something, because I do need to put it up there.
Okay. I'm like such an Amazon girl.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's there right now if people wanted to go and pre-order, but I haven't even told anybody yet. So you guys are the first ones to even know. So yeah.
I'm gonna have to edit this real fast and get it up. Yeah. So and the only editing we do is adding the little cover. So you guys get this like full on the same way that we talked about it. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Dr. Hall, for having this conversation with me today. I feel like we could go on for hours, but we'll have some mercy here and have a part 2 or 3 later. Is there anything, like, how can people find you beyond the website if somebody's not a website person, but they want to connect with you on social media?
If you want to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, it's I am Tamika Hall, and then the number 1 behind it. So I am Tamika Hall 1. That's how you'll find me everywhere.
Perfect. And you'll see that below if you're on YouTube. If you're in the blog, you'll see it written in the blog as well. So connect with our followers, share her with your friends, tell people, because Dr. Hall is just so multifaceted. We haven't even touched the surface today. I do realize one last thing. Can you hold up the purse? Because we didn't talk about the fashion line. And y'all, this is coming out soon.
And the lippies, I'm wearing lippy too as well. But yeah, so I'm really excited because I got to put my design skills and have this purse like manufactured. And if you open up the inside, it even has the name House of Me Couture on the tag. I'm like, oh, she's so official. I can't show it. I can't turn it inside out. But yeah, so I have purses and clothing, and I'm excited. And sometimes God just tells you to push pause on things. And so right now it's pause for the moment, but before the year's out, House of Me Couture will be rocking.
Perfect. And I will be sharing that because you guys know I'm a big fan of small businesses. So while I do all my books through Amazon, I make sure that I support small businesses to offset all of the books I buy on Amazon. And so I really want to make sure that you guys know. And the fashion, we had a little sneak peek when we were going through Purpose of My Vein, and they were some pretty cool designs. So I'm really excited for that. So thank you very much, Dr. Hall. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Share it with your friends and be sure to subscribe to both Dr. Hall's YouTube and mine. I know I never asked for that. I'm going to go ahead and ask today. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Bye.